Hello, and welcome to IMA's Inside Talk webinar series. The title of today's presentation is Reacting to Global Change in the Planning Process, sponsored by Jedox. I'm Margaret Lockery, and I'll be your host for today's Inside Talk webinar. It's a pleasure to have Sue Kawaja as part of our program, and she will be serving as moderator for today's event. Sue is the Business Development Manager at IMA. Hi, Sue. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm pleased to be part of the Inside Talk webinar series, and on behalf of IMA, I want to welcome everyone to today's session. At this time, I would like to introduce our featured presenters for today's program. First, let me introduce Tim Caudill. With 2 decades of domain expertise, Tim brings a unique view of finance organizations about what is practical, important, and achievable. You may learn more about Tim by reviewing his bio in the speaker bio section of your console. Please join me in welcoming Tim Caudill.
Thanks, everybody. Excited to talk today.
Next, I would like to introduce our second featured presenter for today's program, Jochen Hessler. Jochen is currently Senior Director, Product Management, responsible for the creation of innovative FP&A and XP&A, which is Extended Planning and Analysis, solutions to increase productivity using the powerful Jedox platform. Before, he was responsible for Center of Excellence, which included pre-sales, partner enablement, and customer success management. To learn more about Jochen, please take a look in the speaker bio section of your console. Please join me in welcoming Jochen Hessler.
Hey, hello everyone. Glad to be here.
Now, before turning the presentation over to our speakers, I would like to go over the learning objectives for today's program. After participating in this webinar, you should recognize why traditional FP&A planning and techniques are struggling to keep up. You should also be able to explain the importance of incorporating flexible modeling into planning process. You will be able to describe the benefits of modernizing your approach to driver-based planning. And finally, you will be able to discuss the value of scenario and sensitivity analysis. We're looking forward to an informative presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to begin.
Hey, thanks again, everybody, for joining. Just a note about who I and Jochen are. We work for Jedox, which is a company that's been around for 20 years. And, we help folks with some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. Modernizing finance, leveraging technology to get faster and better. But the idea is centered around 3 pillars, which is the idea of integration, flexibility, and simplicity. And sometimes those push and pull with each other. But the idea is we're asked to do more, and we need to do it in ways that are simple and easy for finance folks to do. And we've had a lot of success in our 95% customer retention and over 2,500 global clients can attest to that. And we wake up every day excited to help folks grapple with some of the challenges that we're going to be talking about today, and pretty excited to be here. So thanks, everyone, for joining. And with that, I'm just going to jump right in. Traditional FP&A in a chaotic world, I think it kind of sums up a lot of our lives right now, at least it does mine and some of the folks I work with. Things are changing, and FP&A is being pushed to evolve in ways that I think have been happening for a while, but are accelerating in the face of some of the things that we've been experiencing the last few years. And so we want to kind of double click on that and understand where we are and where we're being asked to go as finance folks. So first, I think just anchor what we mean by traditional FP&A. First, traditional to modern is a journey or a spectrum, right? There are some things in traditional FP&A that still need to happen, like shareholder communication, risk management, and things like that. But it can no longer be necessarily the main focus anymore. Historically, FP&A has been seen as a bit of a back office function, something to help, corporate, if you will, focused on risk management, being compliant, and things like that. Some of the hallmarks of the old school or traditional finance are manual processes and When I say that, I mean spending hours and hours cranking out Excel spreadsheets and reports and things like that. And it's pretty transactional, right? So, we're going to explain our variances. We're going to project out in the future. We're going to provide some reporting. We're going to do some things, all the normal things that we look at in FP&A. And what's becoming clear is that that's no longer enough, and we're being asked, a lot more. Okay. And I think there's a number of challenges that are behind this, and a number of expectations that are growing. And so what we want to do is just take a few minutes to talk about those and talk about that journey from traditional to more modern. If you don't like those terms, that's fine. Just think about growing and evolving and getting better, which I think we should all do anyway in our normal lives, and that's true at work as well. So I think one of the biggest challenges, and I've kind of hinted about this, is just expectations. You've probably experienced the desire in the organization to have more planning cycles, right? So quarterly or yearly plans and budgets become stale very quick. The world's moving fast, and so we've been asked to plan more, to reforecast more often. Another trend that's been happening for a while now is the expectation that we plan deeper into operations. So no longer is it okay to just be at a financial level or a P&L level or something like that. We need to dig deeper and help people in the field make better decisions that are also connected to the financial KPIs and the financial measures that we're all held accountable to. And so, being more consultative is dovetailing with that, right? As we're helping folks plan the business out in the field, we're helping them make decisions based on analytics and data and some of the other things that we deal with in the finance world. I think these all connect, right? And you can use your imagination as we reach deeper into the organization. There's more data, there's more analytics that need to happen. So we need to get more sophisticated with how we use analytics and data in our daily lives in FP&A. This next challenge should come as no surprise. If you don't live in a cave somewhere, you've experienced these things. And we've got a lot of volatility that's happened, and it has been happening for a few years now. And some things that personally, even being in this industry for a long, long time, some things that are new to even me, right? So, we're dealing with inflation. We're dealing with lots of FX fluctuation, monetary policy, right? Those three are all kind of intertwined. I haven't had to think much about inflation for a long time. I haven't had to think a bunch about monetary policy since probably 2008 when things got a little funky back then. And on top of that, if that wasn't enough, as we all know, we're dealing with global conflict and with COVID and different COVID policies in different countries and things like that. In our global supply chain that we've been organizing and developing for many years, it's getting disrupted. And so how we react to that is becoming key. And a recent survey just said, if you're following along, you probably already read this, forecast accuracy and satisfaction in forecasts have declined to 39%, where just last year it was 54. So I think what that says is that we're maybe not keeping up with some of these challenges in a way that's expected of us. And I think that's fair because, we need to invest in tools to be able to react. And I think that's part of it. But then also just changing some of our methodologies and some of the things that we do in ways that can react to some of these things faster. On top of that, it's not as if it's getting easier to manage the business or manage the data that supports our decisions. Data volumes continue to grow. I would be shocked if they don't keep continuing to grow as we go about our lives. And as I mentioned before, not only analytical prowess, but tools to be able to understand, query, to maintain, to cleanse data are becoming more and more necessary in the finance world. Data interconnectivity is becoming necessary, right? It's a huge value that helps us make better decisions. What do I mean by that? So, the finance organization is in a unique position to kind of sit at the top of all of the functions that are happening in business. And I don't mean that hierarchically like we're everybody's boss, but I mean all of the activities of a business filter up into the P&L. They filter into the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. And there's lots of data and detail below that, and connecting those things and leveraging it from top to bottom to make better decisions is becoming key. It's not an easy task. Data quality, data issues are often why people come and talk to us at Jedox, to help get out of the data cellar, as we call it. But it's also just becoming necessary to compete. If you can't quickly make decisions and connect all the dots in your organization, you're not getting a full picture and maybe not making the best decisions. There's a push and pull here as well. Understanding what data is relevant and not just throwing the kitchen sink at everything is important also. You can lose the story through the noise of tons of data. So being able to manage it, wrangle it, query it, make sure it's accurate and usable is becoming a real valuable asset to organizations. And if you don't have that in your arsenal, you're frankly falling behind. The next one is lack of tools, and I've alluded to this a little bit. Finance historically has been a bit of a laggard in investing in itself. Like, they sign off on all the checks and do the ROI calculations of new software and new tools and new machines throughout the businesses and the organizations. But internally in finance, 58% of organizations polled still use Excel. Now, if you were a business or an organization of a certain size with a certain complexity, Excel could be completely fine for some of the things we're talking about today. But when you get to a certain size and a certain complexity, when we start leveraging all that data that we talked about, Excel becomes problematic and difficult. Wonderful tool. At Jedox, we're not saying get rid of Excel. I don't want nasty letters or anything sent my way. We love Excel. We use it and we leverage it even in our tool. But the idea is if that's your main system, if that's your main data wrangling system, you're going to have a lot of difficulties as you grow. And what will become is siloed information. So 31% of organizations polled don't have one single source of the truth. It's a huge problem. If you've ever been in a boardroom and people are arguing about which spreadsheet has the right numbers, it is not a fun time. And so we want to run away from that as fast as we can and have a single source of the truth that everyone trusts so we can focus on making the right decisions, not focusing on getting the right inputs to make those decisions. And then, as we advance into running businesses with KPIs and real-time data and things like that, it's important that people have visibility. As of now, the survey says 46% of C-suite teams have online access to real-time performance data. So that means they're waiting to get information that they could be leveraging faster to make decisions quicker, to chart a better direction in the organization. And so that's key. And so speed is a huge aspect here, but speed in the face of an increasing scale is causing the need for new tools and new methodologies and new ways of doing things. We're going to talk about some of those today, about how we can unlock some new technology and unlock really some of the really smart folks in the finance organization to do the things that they actually went to school for. I say this, I took maybe 1 or 2 Excel classes in college. I didn't go to college for Excel, but that was all I did for the first part of my career for a long time. And I think there's better uses. If you think about anything that's repetitive and manual, it's ripe for automation and ripe to help us move along that journey. Speaking of the journey, what do we mean by modern FP&A? It spreads the gamut from strategy all the way down to operational. So we're covering the business from a charting course standpoint to a getting it done standpoint. It's becoming highly automated so we can do some of the things that we've talked about. It needs to be extremely collaborative. Quick communication, quick decisions are key. It needs to be continual. And we'll talk about some tools, specifically AI, how we can continually analyze data all the time, even when we sleep, which is a little scary sometimes to think about. But the huge thing here is being value creative. If you meet somebody in the organization, you walk up to their office, if they are going, oh no, do I have to fill out another spreadsheet? You're probably not being value creative. If they go, oh yay, Jochen's here, he's going to help you make great decisions, that's the feeling we want to give people. That's what's required of us in this modern age. And we've got a little chart here of some of the ways that we can achieve that journey. But I think it'd be smart to get some of Jochen's thoughts on how he sees this in the marketplace and how he sees this journey happening a little bit with finance.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, I think it very much depends on the company's maturity level regarding FP&A processes and to find out in which areas you as a company can improve. It's usually helpful to think in 3 dimensions. The one dimension is data integration. Yeah, so data sources, basically. Second dimension is functional integration. So are you focusing on finance or sales, or does it make sense to integrate HR and other departments? And third dimension is process maturity, which means are you adopting top-down, bottom-up procedures? Are you using workflows for more collaborative approaches? Are you using scenarios? Are you using artificial intelligence, etc.? So these are the three dimensions where you could think about in searching for new values. And this is something we are helping customers with by mapping out where it makes sense to put puzzle pieces together on their journey. And it's very similar to what I'm actually doing as a product manager in agile software development processes. So we collect feedback from our stakeholders, we build something, we receive feedback, we improve it over time and deliver value in areas where you can gain highest impact, let's say. And the whole process of continuous improvements is certainly a marathon, but we usually deliver it in many short sprints, right?
Got it. Thanks, Jochen. I think that resonates with me. And now you're saying, all right, Tim, I already know that my job is hard. So how are you going to help me? And I think, the rest of the conversation is going to be focused on that. But before we get to that, it is time for our first poll question. So Sue, if you could help us out with that, that'd be awesome.
Thank you, Tim. Attendees should see the first poll question now open on your screen. If you cannot see the poll question, please refresh your browser, which should correct the issue. I would like to remind all participants that you may begin responding to each question as soon as it appears on your screen. Our first poll question is, has your CFO's organization explored modern technology like AI or machine learning? The options are A, we use AI currently, B, we're interested in implementing AI and we are exploring options, or option C, AI is not on our radar. Please take a moment to submit your answer and then click on the submit button on the right side, just below the response option. And with that, let me just see if we have, okay, so we are ready to see how our members responded.
All right, this is always exciting for us to see. So some folks using AI at 15.7%, quite a healthy portion are interested in it. AI is not on the radar of lots of folks. And I think as we talk about that and some other concepts, hopefully that'll change potentially, but also I think it might be a legacy of how difficult it has been in the past to leverage some of these things. We're entering kind of a new world there, and I think Jochen will more eloquently than I kind of give some explanation there. So I'll turn it over to you for some useful parts of the session.
No, I agree. I mean, AI is relatively new, and we see that our customers and companies are hesitant sometimes to really apply it because they think it is now the next cumbersome, huge project they are in, and that shouldn't be the case. So you should. That's why I said we deliver usually in short sprints. So you need to figure out where is potential for AI. It's not everywhere, right? But I come to this later. So identifying exactly the area where AI can add value is key, number one. And then second, don't try to do it in a huge project, but try to adopt it in a few areas quickly. See it in a POC, for example, use 2-3 days, get a good opinion, good gut feel about, hey, is it adding value or not? And then proceed. And that's what we're usually doing at our customers as well, mainly in the area of sales forecasting. And also now, as crisis hit us and inflation, you were talking about it, it's also more in the cost area. So for cost and cash forecasting, it's actually where we see an increase of adoption in regards to AI. All right. I think we're done with the poll question, and I'll move on, right?
Yep.
Cool. So then, now I'm going to show you why flexibility for planning models is important. And I will start the topic off with 2 quotes. The first quote is from Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn and Microsoft board member. And he says, adaptability is the new stability. And it means that, of course, stability is important to investors, to banks, and also very much to employees. And being static is a liability. But a constant, accurate forecast prediction is indicating stability more than achieving year-end targets if change is, properly communicated. And stability is nowadays more about how you can handle the change and how flexible you can adapt to new circumstances. And that's why I like that quote very much. Second quote is actually a very famous one, which I really like, but I don't even know who said it actually. But the second quote I like is, if a plan doesn't work, change the plan, but not the goal. That sometimes happens in many companies at the moment. And so in Europe, where I'm located at the moment in Germany, we also say many routes lead to Rome. So adaptability is not meaning that we are constantly changing our goals, right? It is about finding new ways how to achieve them. And I will give you an example where we manage it intuitively already on a daily basis, but maybe not yet adapted it in our businesses. Here in this screenshot I took from a navigation system, Tesla Waze. You can use it to access real-time traffic conditions, and it's actually relying on user data, like is there still a broken car on your line, etc. So you get asked and just can submit it, and you feed the system with actual real-time information by different users. And we are always using these systems, even if we know already the route, right? So we actually use it every time to find the best route and being able to handle possible obstacles in a flexible manner. Like calling my wife that I'm late for dinner or something. And the same applies for continuous forecasting, which requires, again, high flexibility, and you need to perform it without too much manual effort in combination with calculated predictions again. And so these are the 5 arguments why flexibility is key. So for 5 years now, flexibility of the software has been #1 reason why companies buy a planning tool, according to BARC, which is Business Application Research Center, which is an European-based international analyst for EPM software, so enterprise performance management software. And second, changing world and changing market conditions require fast-changing business models on the one hand side, and changing business models again means that you need to change the planning models to be competitive, to apply it quickly. So now we were talking about it already. Third topic is new predictive planning and forecasting approaches require flexible data models, because you're adding business drivers, like in that Waze example of the navigation system, to combine manual data sets with AI and machine learning algorithms. So for example, we have a customer in the hospitality industry, and they are actually using booking data from multiple booking portals, and they add regional events manually. So it's a combination from, hey, I can extract from external sources and can automate whatever I want to have, and then you add stuff which is only in the minds of a few people who are located in the different regions. And that actually increases accuracy of forecasts and reduce cycle time for planning and forecasting, right? And then fourth topic is an integrated XP&A planning concept, which means extended planning and analysis, requires flexible data models across various departments with different business models which need to be reflected in the data model anyhow. So for example, we have manufacturers who are focusing on production planning and having separate legal entities, for example, for sales and distribution, sometimes B2B, sometimes B2C, and requires different reflection on a data model and a planning model. And number 5 is what we see very often, if a planning process can't be adapted flexibly in a system, then you will end up again with manual and disconnected Excel sheets, right? If we look where actually flexibility is key, it is actually on different layers. So on the first layer, it's back-end connection. Integration is key. You want to extract data from multiple data sources like SAP, Microsoft, Salesforce, from databases, from web services, etc. Once you have them, you need to have transforming capabilities, being able to translate raw data and translate it into information. Then third, you need to have a consistent multidimensional database. And for example, in my first position as a sales controller, like some years ago, I planned sales revenue by regions, by customer, by sales rep, by products. So if you do that separately, you end up with different revenue targets, right? So as one of my first projects, I introduced a multidimensional database to make sure that all the planning is consistent in each. The next topic is master data and hierarchies, which change over time. Of course, master data is changing over time. Sometimes hierarchies are changing over time, and you need to be flexible to adopt these ones, and you should be able to do it by yourselves or not be dependent on an IT specialist who is then adapting and changing it according to the real stuff. Number 5 is artificial intelligence. Algorithms require also data sets, which sometimes need to be prepared in a flexible manner because it very much depends on your data source. And sometimes we need to change time formats, sometimes we need to change and identify outliers, etc. So there need to be a bit of preparation to really make use of the data you have. And then number 6 is reporting capabilities, and it's sometimes underestimated, but reporting needs to be flexible. Otherwise, you end up again in Excel sheets if you want to fulfill changing requirements of your bosses, right? And that's why flexibility is really important. And actually, that was the last slide on flexibility, and handing over to Sue for the next poll question. All right.
Thank you, Jochen. Attendees should see the second poll question now open on your screen. If you cannot see the poll question, please refresh your browser, which should correct the issue. Our second polling question is, what tool do you primarily use for planning? Your options are A, Excel, B, we have software for planning, but we need to augment it with Excel, or option C, we use solution that allows us the flexibility to fully plan for our business. Please be sure to click the submit button, which is located on the right side of your screen, just below the response option, in order for us to successfully record your answer. And let me just make sure that attendees are also, just a reminder that make sure to send us your questions and comments by typing them into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. And with that, let me just see how we are doing with the responses here.
Very interesting. And I'm really super excited to see results here, as they also differ across the different regions.
Yeah, it's exciting to see how well it tracks with some of the other polling we do. It's always exciting, different sets of folks and how they line up across the globe. I agree.
And it changes, right? So a few years back, it was a lot around Excel, and now it changed. But still, now it's more that people want to enhance their existing planning systems, but they don't want to go into the details and influence the results here. Let's check. Cool. So should we check for the results, or anyone else to vote then?
Yeah, sure. Yes, we can go ahead and see how our audience responded.
All right, cool. Let me Let me see. So Excel is 60%, 60% of companies, or at least for attendees, are using Excel primarily for planning tool. 31.8, so 32% have the software for planning, but need to use Excel in addition. And nearly 8% say we use a solution that allows us the flexibility to fully plan for our business. Congratulations. I think that's exactly what I was expecting somehow, so the results differ for some years. I think Excel was even more prominent in the past years, and now people adopted already planning systems. So is there anything new for you, what you figured out so far, Tim? Or
not really. And I think the one thing to keep in mind as we go through all these things is if any of these tools fit your business well and you're able to achieve, a lot of the things we've been talking about, it's fine. So we're not pushing you in any direction, but maybe opening your mind to the possibilities if you are struggling a bit with some manual processes. But yeah, these track with what I was expecting. Yeah.
All right, then I move on to the next topic, and we've briefly touched on this subject already, and now I'm talking about driver-based planning approaches in a bit more detail. Here in the picture, you can see a skier enjoying his ride down to the valley in the here and now, but you see perhaps already in the background, so behind him something is already coming up. So basically it's a similar story with the car again, where you need to look into or through the front screen, but also need to check your surroundings, including the back mirror, and utilizing all the data which impact your basically a safe arrival, right? And only focusing on finance, so transfer to business, only focusing on finance or focusing on sales or workforce planning is not sufficient. If you look at them isolated, and departmental plans need to be connected. So you can't do that manual all the time and figure out and key in all the different items. You need to speed up and plan more often. And that's why you need to understand the relationships that influence your goal achievement. And these are actually business drivers. And a broader view, of course, helps to understand your situation a little bit better. And you can identify and understand drivers, not only the internal ones, which you already know, like for the skier, like speed or skills, muscles, but also the external drivers, like weather conditions, other people on the slope, etc. And you need to be able to collect drivers on a regular cadence, and you need to understand correlations, very similar to the navigation system, so that you can calculate predictions based on changes of these drivers. And the broader view allows you to compare multiple scenarios. So do you take the fast route to keep the navigation example, or the beautiful route? Do you want to save gasoline or not? So, right? And with drivers, you can explain the deviation to actuals, which is super important, because if your budget is based on a gut feeling, it will be difficult to explain. Is it due to price effects or volume effects, etc.? But if it's not calculated, it will be difficult to derive the right actions. And that's the beauty of driver-based planning. It is calculated, and that's why you can explain it. In the next illustration, that's something we show customers, how driver-based planning is set up and how the sub-plans are linked together. And each sub-plan, again, can consist of any numbers of drivers. Here you have to check exactly how complex you want to build this up. So simplicity is one key, that you don't overcomplicate it, but that you connect the dots as much as possible. For example, in sales, you may have units and prices, but as well the number of sales reps and how mature they are. So how long are they in the company? how many customers they manage, etc. So it depends on really figuring out what the right level of complexity is. And all the subplans are linked either directly to a P&L line or linked to the cost centers or profit centers you have, and then to the P&L, which is then again the basis for deriving integrated finance planning, containing balance sheet, cash flow, or in bigger enterprises, allocations with transfer pricing topics or financial consolidation. But having these sub-plans being connected helps you actually to perform planning processes continuously, get more insights, explainable results and deviations, and you can do it fast. So you can do it more often. And really an action plan or checklist which could help you to really set it up is start with your most relevant areas for planning and forecasting. So use your P&L and check for potential candidates where you can improve the planning process. Don't start at the very minor set of costs, which are anyhow a kind of fixed cost, for example. Then second, decide on the approach for each P&L line. So which P&L line are planned driver-based? So where does it make sense to have a driver-based plan? Which with AI or machine learning, integrating internal and external drivers, or which remain manually planned, which is also fine. If it's easy, then just keep it as it is and don't try to overcomplicate something. Then set up the model of value drivers. And as I said, consider to use external drivers as well, like stock, market information, etc. Integrate these drivers. Excuse me, that's a bad cough. Integrate these drivers into your reporting and monitor accuracy over time, because this helps you a lot, again, for the next planning cycle. And use subset of these value drivers for strategy planning. That was exactly what Tim was lining out as well. And then, search for tools which support you in driver-based planning, AI, and more flexible planning approaches. Good. Sorry for interruption. I'm handing over to the next poll to save some time.
Thank you so much, Jochen. All right, so we are at our third poll question. Some of our audience did have trouble viewing the previous question, so please remember, if you cannot see the poll questions, then refresh your browser. I would like to also remind participants that you may begin responding to each question as soon as it appears on your screen. Our third poll question is, do you include external data and forecasts as drivers in your planning process? Your options are A, we often use external data and forecasts as drivers. Option B, external data and forecasts are used to inform planners, but not directly as drivers. Or option C, we do not incorporate external data or forecasts. Please be sure to click the submit button, which is again located on the right side of your screen, in order for just below the response option, so we can successfully record your response. Now with that, I hope, Jochen, you're feeling better. You got some water in you?
Yes, I got some water. Thank you very much. I think we can
all right. So we
see the results already. So again, very excited. So let me go to the results page.
Yeah.
All right. So how many of you include external data for forecast? Nearly 40% use external data as drivers, which is really cool number. External data and forecasts are used to inform planners, but not directly as drivers, which is to 45%, which is good as well. And we don't incorporate external data or forecasts, only 15.7%, which is a great number. I'm impressed. Really good results, to my opinion. And yeah, what do you say, Tim?
Yeah, I think most organizations at least have a view to external drivers. And also, I often wonder, maybe we should have had a poll question, who's gotten sick from visiting relatives last weekend, but another conversation. So let's keep going here. Thanks for your participation. So the last topic we want to talk about is scenario and sensitivity analysis. And I think this is kind of a lot of the things that we've talked about so far in action, if you will. What do we do with these tools? What do we do with these driver-based plans? What do we do with these ever-evolving correlations and external data? And how do we bring it together? And the answer is becoming, for most organizations, more scenario and sensitivity analysis. So when we think about scenario and sensitivity analysis, let's define terms just a little bit, because they overlap and they're a little bit related. But typically, sensitivity modeling is looking at one thing at a time. How sensitive is my sales to my price? It's a very important sensitivity, but it's one thing. Scenario modeling looks at lots of different variables in the face of an event or a change or a decision. And so the idea is combining sensitivity and scenario to do what some people are calling scenario management these days, but to understand lots of different paths. And back to the navigation app, if a block gets if a route gets blocked, how are we going to go around it? Now, we want to have these plans in place to help us. When we look, I think a good way to look at this is this graph, and it's a little bit small, so I apologize if you can't see it. But the idea of a predictability span, and in the face of a lot of the challenges that we've been talking about, volatility, inflation, things like that, that predictability span, that blue box, is getting smaller. That's kind of the extent to which we can comfortably predict what's going to happen, right? And so that box is probably more of a wavy line, depending on what you're looking at. But the idea is what is my Q4 outlook? What is the next 12 months going to be? Well, it's becoming more and more difficult to get to that 12-month prediction with a lot of accuracy, or even to get to next month these days. And so there's a lot of pressure there. And so when we get outside of the predictability span, there's lots of multiple possibilities. And the idea here is to model as many out as makes sense, so that you get an understanding for what happens if government legislation comes into play with your business, or if raw materials get disrupted with supply chain. And so what do we do with these pieces of information, and how far out do we need to plan? Those are all kind of bespoke to a specific business. But the takeaway is being able to model out enough variability to have a really good plan in place for the things that come down the way. And when people come to talk to us, this is often one of their goals, right? So data, technology, processes, automation, but then also I want a scenario plan. What if I do this? What if I do that? How does this impact this? What if unexpected things happen? And this is a way that we can wrangle that by having lots of possible futures kind of already thought through. The FP&A Trend Survey says that only 6% of organizations can run scenarios in real time. About 13% are able to run them in less than a day, which isn't too bad, maybe. 55% says it's a long and challenging process, and 26% are unable to run scenario plans. And they're probably running a scenario, right, or a couple, like a budget and a forecast, but this idea of scenario management, multiple scenarios attached to sensitivity, it needs to be able to be achieved very quickly. And there's a couple other characteristics that I think are worth looking at here. When you're doing scenario modeling, it needs to be fast and automated. Back when we were trying to move folks to rolling monthly forecasts, if it took you longer than a month to do your forecast, it's kind of impossible, right? Or at least really difficult. So we need these things to be automated and fast. And what that means is, even though we're doing more and exploring more decisions and more outcomes, that doesn't mean we're making more spreadsheets and making finance people sleep less, because let's be honest, they work weekends already. So what we need to do is have some tools that allow us to do this at the level that's appropriate to make better decisions, but it needs to be fast. Dovetailing with that, kind of connected to that, is this multidimensional driver-based aspect, right? If I want to change a variable and I've got to do a bunch of manual things to figure out what the impact is on my financial statements, that's going to slow us down. by using these quick automated driver-based multidimensional approaches, we have an ecosystem or a platform, if you will, so that we can see all the interconnectivity of decisions that we make in these different scenarios. And one really interesting thing is this idea of continual vigilance. And why that's interesting is this periodic idea of finance, where we're going to do a quarterly forecast or a monthly rolling forecast. Those are important, and sometimes the only way if we're dealing with certain financials, entries, and closing activities and things like that. But the events, the external drivers, the sales, the operations, the activities, they never stop. They don't sleep. So having some technology that can continually watch how things are going to inform your scenarios in real time. And I actually talked to a person a few weeks ago who their finance department doesn't even plan or forecast anymore. They continually look at impacts that are going based on some live data. Now, that might be a bridge too far even for me. I haven't fully wrapped my head around that. But their business was changing so fast that predicting the future wasn't working well, and they were just kind of dealing with the now in real time, which is an interesting way to look at it. Where you land there depends on your organization, your desire for change, what makes sense. Again, we want these things to be as simple as possible and easy to use and as fast as possible. We're not asking finance to do more hours. We're asking them to reallocate hours to decision making and supporting and not churning out data. Okay. These scenario plans can help us make really, really great decisions. So if we want to sign a really restrictive contract, right? Like maybe a single source for a raw material or a supply. What does it look like now? Well, maybe it looks great. It's cheaper, right? Well, what does it look like in the face of headwinds for hiring and differences in demand and changes in other things like that? You need to be able to scenario plan these things out before you sign on the dotted line. What does it look like a shift to temporary labor if we have issues hiring? What's the cost benefit of multi-sourcing our supply chain? And that's a really big one right now because of all the supply chain disruptions. Before, we only went for the cheapest option, most efficient, cheapest, right? Now it's also layering in what's secure, what's repeatable, what can I trust, what's a backup and a backup to the backup. And so these are all things that we can grapple with a great scenario planning methodology. And it really brings together all of the things that we talked about. Connected, evolving, real-time correlations and driver-based plans that are multidimensional, that connect an organization and an ecosystem, and now layering on top of that, the ability to look at many different possible futures to fine-tune and make the best decisions we can, but then also to react faster when things go a certain direction that maybe we didn't fully expect, okay? Because we can make a new scenario plan, or maybe we've already made one to have a game plan for that, okay? And with that, it brings us to our final poll question.
Thank you, Tim. Attendees now should see our final and last poll question on your screen. And once again, if you cannot see the question, please refresh your browser. Or if you're having any trouble hearing the speaker, then also refresh your browser. That will fix the issue. Our last question is, what does scenario planning look like at your organization? Your options are A, we run scenarios in real time. Option B, we run scenarios in less than 1 day. Option C, running scenarios is a long process. Or option D, we are not able to run scenarios. Please note that after selecting the answer, you must click the submit button. And with that, actually, before we look at how attendees are going to respond, Tim or Jochen, if you can, what are your guesses? What do you think how our audience would respond to this question?
Wow. I think C is going to be a really popular choice, but hopefully I don't change anybody's mind who hasn't clicked the button yet.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and click next and see how they responded.
Hey! All right, I'm going to go buy some lottery tickets now. No, it's very clearly C, and I'm not surprised, right? If you're doing things manually, it takes a long time, and it's pretty much that simple, right? And Jochen, I'm sure that probably resonated with you and some of the folks you talked to.
Yeah. I haven't won so far in the lottery, but I would have had the same guess. So I think it's very good, and still, I would say it's cool that even 26% are able to run scenarios in less than 1 day. We see companies who are really struggling with it and having multiple disconnected Excel sheets running through companies and then end up in having a scenario for only a few items and departments, but a full scenario is really rare, and it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's wrap up and open it up to some Q&A here. I think in conclusion, traditional finance, modern finance, if you don't like those themes, cool. But the idea is that we're getting stretched a bit. Things are tough, and we have to keep up. And so we're asked to do more cycles, more stakeholders, more insights. We're asked to be more flexible, but then also deeper and more granular, really difficult asks. And so what it's requiring is to root out time-intensive tasks that can be automated. They just have to, again, you have really smart finance folks who go to university, who work really hard. We don't want them doing manual things. We want to unlock that mental capacity to help the business get better. And four, in the face of all the things that we're facing today, uncertainties and things like that, have a plan for your plan. Use scenario and sensitivity planning to create plans B, C, all the way through N, to make sure that you've game planned out an appropriate number of possibilities. And all of these things need to be balanced by some of the pillars that we focus on at Jedox. And one of those is simplicity. We're throwing a lot out at you, a lot of different concepts wrapped up with technology, but then also doing more, doing it faster, doing it more granularly. There's a limit to the effectiveness of that, right? Everything has diminishing returns, and we always have to keep simplicity, flexibility in play as we integrate to all of these different other systems and as we kind of do our work. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderators, and we will have, looks like a few minutes for some question and answer.
Thank you so much, Tim and Jochen. Attendees should see the evaluation survey now open on your screen. If it did not open, then please click the evaluation survey icon at the bottom of your screen for access. We appreciate your feedback, so please complete the survey while we address some of the audience questions. Now, let's see. We have a lot of questions. So the first one is going to be, I'm hearing a lot about AI for years. Can you describe how adoption of AI works in real life?
Real life. Jochen, I can jump on that one if you want. So it's funny. It's interesting to watch AI adoption in an organization, right? Because it's an investment in technology. It's typically new. Jochen had a great suggestion to do a POC or a pilot. But whether you do that or not, there will be hesitancy to rely on it at first. And I think that's just a natural human condition. And what we found that's interesting about the adoption is it goes from, I guess, skepticism or interest to a little bit more trust to almost an expectation. And so after it's been used for a while and refined and proven itself to be pretty effective to forecast in certain parts of the business, and again, not every part, right? You're always going to build in your assumptions, your conversations you have with suppliers and things like that. But when you build those in after it gets mature, then it flips a bit. And if you change and deviate from what the AI predicts, you're asked to explain yourself. And so that's kind of the life cycle of it. It's interest and maybe trepidation, increased reliance, and then a really healthy gut check. Because if you think things are going to go in a wildly different direction, that's a really great conversation starter and a conversation you need to have. And you can use it to highlight those things, in the organization. And Jochen, I don't know if you have anything else to add there, but that's kind of how I see it when we deploy it for folks.
No, exactly. Sometimes we have to convince our customers to just try it out and use it in a POC, for example, and then we do so we have to train a model. So we go into the history of data and try to reproduce a forecast based on technology and compare it then to the manual plans and manual forecasts. And then once people figure out, wow, that's very close to what where we landed or what we've planned in those days, then they start believing in it, and we have a good results so far. Last thing was a a producer of building materials, from a big international company, and they were exactly doing the same thing. So sales forecasting, comparing it to the manual forecast in the history, they were quite impressed. And so I was also impressed. Sometimes it's really depending also on the data, I must admit. But to try it out, there is so much potential, and I think it is the hesitance you've mentioned. And we are always, you said it already, everyone is working already hard. So why, trying the next multi-day project? It's usually not. So try it within 3-4 days and then set your limit, but try it.
Cool.
All right, so our second question is, what tools do you suggest using to get started with sensitivity and scenario planning?
Wow. Jochen, you want to take that one? Yeah. Or I can, doesn't matter.
That was your topic, so you can take it.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, so, there's a tool I use that I want to suggest, but we're not going to be that way, right? And I think the answer there is what tools work best for your goals. And there are probably organizations that can do a lot of this in Excel. And I'm just going to be honest about that. It's not a bad tool. It has some statistical analysis capabilities, as we all know. The ability to connect things and do some drivers, and in conjunction with some other tools can be, a great use case. One of the things we talked about, though, is consultancy with the business, collaboration, building an insight from across the organization. And using Excel for that can be okay, but often starts to be problematic, right? And so getting people things in a more web-based format or something they can do on their phone or an iPad becomes more and more important the more and more people you add. So instead of suggesting a tool, which I think is a bit of hubris, because there are different tools in the marketplace for a reason. It's why we don't talk badly about our competitors, right? If it works for you and it's awesome, then it's the perfect tool for you. But I can speak a little bit about things to look for. And things to look for are automation and speed, right? It needs to be fast. It needs to be integrated to the systems. If your CRM system is key in forecasting sales, which is key in doing HR, and those live in 3 different silos, you're going to have difficulty with this integrated planning concept that we've been talking about. And I think finally, and very importantly, it needs to be accessible and easy to use for finance, right? So often folks will come talk to us and say, hey, we have software, but we're doing it manually because our business changed and we didn't want to pay $100,000 to someone to come rewrite some code, right? That's no longer accessible. It's just the difference between using DOS back in the day, and a lot of people on the phone probably don't even remember what that is, and now GUI-based interfaces like Windows and iOS and things like that. And so I think those are some principles to think about: connected, flexible, but also simple enough that finance folks can make their own reports, change their own allocations, run their own scenarios. That's key. And in today's day and age and the maturity of this type of software, it should just be an expectation. If it's something that you don't feel that you can do on your own, you should keep looking, in my opinion. Again, there are organizations that just want to have a professional do everything for them, and they pay them, and that's fine. And that's okay if that's your strategy. But to me, I'm not a control freak, but I do like to control my own destiny a little bit. And being able to manage these tools are key. And I say, so hopefully I didn't really answer your question and tell you to go buy X product, but some tips and to kind of help you navigate that hopefully will help.
Thank you, Tim. Attendees, we will go a few minutes over just so that I can get at least 3 questions in for you. All right, so our last question here is going to be, what are some tips you have for FP&A folks to persuade management to invest in FP&A systems? As you know, they are generally unwilling to invest in technology that are not directly tied to revenue. So if you can give us some tips there.
Tim.
Yeah, sure. I think cocktail hours is always a good one. No, I'm just kidding. I think Jochen kind of helped us here. A proof of concept, a vision, is key. And there are some ROI aspects of these things where you can actually make better decisions, increase sales, decrease costs. But there's a kind of tangential ROI that's harder to quantify. What's the value of avoiding a mistake, right? And so I think it's becoming easier to convince people about these concepts because they're the ones asking for more plans and more fresh data and more insights and more analytics and running the business on KPI. So I think organizations and management are starving for these things, and coming in with a plan and a solution and is a lot easier to attach benefits and convince somebody about than just this nebulous idea that it's going to make my life easier, right? Everybody's life's hard. That's not unique. That's not a really persuasive argument. So what you need to do is show them, say, Mr. CFO, Mrs. CFO, what if you had a dashboard like this that showed you live information like this that you could drill on and understand and then get people in a workflow to go kick off a plan to react to it in real time? Does that sound exciting to you? And so what you can do is kind of cast this vision. Folks like us can actually help you with that, but kind of chart that course out. And of course, they'll put their spin on it and have their input. But we've found over the years that there are some organizations that need convincing, but most organizations are actually just hungry for these concepts to get them in place. And so having that good vision to cast and a good presentation to make, attaching ROI into it, if it's a positive ROI, that's even easier. It usually is. But I think just going in and presenting these concepts to them, it's going to be a slam dunk for them to want to be able to do them. Now, to get them to write the check and things like that, that's another conversation that might take some more talking and strategy that the team works together. But we find that when these types of technologies are seen by executives, they get excited and actually expand the scope of these things, which is pretty validating. So.
Thank you so much once again. And with that, I'm going to turn your attention back to our host, Margaret.
Thank you, Sue. At this time, I'd like to thank our presenters, Tim Caudill and Jochen Hessler, for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. We're very appreciative that they've made time for IMA and for our audience today. And also, thank you, Sue Klaja, for moderating today's event. I want to again thank Jedox for sponsoring today's webinar and thank all of you for your participation in today's event, your commitment to IMA, and your professional development through IMA's Insight Talk webinar series. I look forward to spending time with you again soon when we'll enjoy some more Insight Talk.